a hot second. So it's thinking. We are live. That was fast.
Wow.
Hi, everybody. We were going to start off with a great intro video. However, as usual, like it takes a couple seconds. So if you're ready, though, I think we can start that video right about now. What do you think, Jess?
Let's go.
Let's go.
For decades now, Americans have been told that we should trust the system, but our children are sicker, chronic diseases exploding, and the answers that we've been given aren't working. Many of us have come to the conclusion that government actually lies to us. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS secretary. This podcast is about telling the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. I'm going to have fearless conversations with critical thinkers, including independent doctors, respected scientists, and leaders in medical innovation and research. I'm going to ask the questions and lift the taboos and expose the hypocrisy and the conflicts and the corruption. We're going to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And we're going to name the names of the forces that obstruct the paths to public health. This isn't going to be about politics. It's about our families, it's about our children, and it's about confronting the spiritual malaise and embracing the truth. If we want a healthy nation, we have to confront the lies that have made us spiritually, morally, and physically sick. The time for half measures is now over. We're launching a new era of radical transparency in government here at HHS. I hope you'll join us in our mission to make America healthy again.
Could you really have picked grimmer theme music for something that's supposed to be about health and vitality and getting people excited about that? I mean, it sounds like somebody's about to find out that they're adopted.
Yeah.
Or something, their parents just died, their dog just died. God, that's a depressing health podcast.
But let's think about it, though, Angie. I mean, there's high drama because this is a political move. This is something that is done because the midterms are coming, and he is now about to go on an extremely expensive, taxpayer-funded grand tour all over the country, where he's going to be doing interviews for this podcast and extra special shows to essentially make sure that the MAGA alliance stays strong and that their team keeps winning because the midterms are right around the corner.
Yeah. And I think, along those lines, we've talked about this quite a lot. There's been, and actually, hold on one second. I forgot to introduce myself. You forgot to introduce yourself. We forgot to introduce what show this even is, because, it's so easy to get distracted by the sort of grim dystopian future that the MAHA movement is promising us now. If you just vote Republican in the midterms, I guess. But I'm Angie Rasmussen. This is my co-host, Jessica Malaty Rivera, who you just heard giving that excellent insight into Kennedy's, probably the next few months anyways, within the MAHA movement. And I think there's a lot to unpack about what might happen after that. But there's a lot to unpack today. So we'll just get right back into it. And I think we've talked a lot about how the MAHA and the MAGA movements are starting to fracture in some places. There's issues like glyphosate, for example, a Roundup that is now a strategic priority or defense priority for the U.S. And so therefore, there's an executive order to remove liability from the manufacturer of glyphosate to allow them to make a ton of glyphosate, just basically make a shitload of glyphosate to put in the national stockpile to guard against agricultural bioterrorism and things like that. So, that's a huge priority of the MAGA movement. The MAHA movement hates glyphosate, even though it's never been shown to actually cause cancer or any of the bad things that they say that it does. Our agricultural system is completely dependent on glyphosate. And there's no way to have any kind of real food, processed or otherwise, without it. So Kennedy's got a tough job because he's got to convince these people that he's been feeding pseudoscience to and who have been following him with near religious zeal on the topic he's got to convince them that basically they've got to be okay with this like super poisonous toxic compound that he's been railing against for years, and in fact himself suing the manufacturer of. And he's got to tell them, like, actually, this is so important. So we talked about this too with Casey Means' hearing. The answer to that is always, well, it's so complex. So I'm sure those complexities are going to be exactly what they're untangling, except instead of untangling, it's going to be more like just sort of laundering the beliefs of these sort of opposed movements into one thing so that they can remain politically viable, because the people who are actually promoting these movements aren't really true believers. They don't really believe in these principles that they're espousing. Instead, they're like Kennedy, they're maybe true believers, but in something else. And that is getting rid of vaccines and eliminating public health and, ushering in authoritarianism.
Right. I mean, Bobby is, if he's anything, he's a master wordsmith. And that's how he gets away with, saying things like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just want evidence-based, rigorous science, gold standard science. And that's what we can probably expect them to be pushing this podcast as being, that it's going to be the whole Rolodex of every single COVID contrarian coming in as, a valiant question asker, a truth seeker, a person who was maliciously sidelined or censored or deplatformed by the algorithms, and will continue to perpetuate many of the mantras and battle cries of the Maha movement that he campaigned on, and then he eventually, melded into the MAGA orbit to get on top and to become HHS secretary. I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, while there's the Venn diagram, these are two fundamentally incompatible movements, but it's become such a like parasitic symbiotic relationship. Like, I just imagine they're both like eating each other alive, that they can't undo whatever amalgam this has turned into, because both need each other to stay in power.
Yeah.
And I think this podcast is going to be an attempt to keep validating Maha in the MAGA orbit, potentially even to do some of the evangelism that he has to do about things that are very inconsistent with his previous positions, like Monsanto and glyphosate. And so you're probably going to see a lot of the same, mitochondrial dysfunction, eating real food and food dyes and ivermectin and COVID vaccine harm, and maybe even the drama that happened at ACIP, probably the drama that happened on ACIP, the pediatric vaccine schedule, hepatitis B, and of course, the autism, quote, epidemic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that initially, at least leading up to the midterms, and we'll see how this all goes, because this changes from week to week. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot, like off screen, is just that we keep hearing so many crazy different rumors. Like, one rumor is that Kennedy's just fine. He and Trump are still besties, all good and no problems. And then all the way to he's getting canned.
He's getting fired. Yeah,
he was supposed to get fired and he didn't because other shit came up.
Yeah.
And, I think the one thing that is true is that there is a directive from the White House to tone it down with all of the anti-vax stuff in particular. But that is mostly based on a poll result that shows that anti-vax stuff isn't polling well. Yeah. That is something that definitely could change depending on how everything goes. And given that earlier this week, we were having a discussion about whether there was going to be nukes launched. I think that, we can't predict what's going to happen in a couple months from now. So it could be that Kennedy's either out or he's got a full license to just be as anti-vax as he wants to be, and completely nuts. But I think if, he's trying to sort of, hide the crazy a little bit and just try to perform like he's a normal Secretary of Health and Human Services and just a regular guy who's got the best interest of the American people at heart, he's probably going to sneak in his anti-vax shit where he can, but instead he's going to focus on the stuff that is actually a winner from Maha, because nobody really opposes it, which is, eat better, eat more fresh foods, eat more protein, whatever. Yeah. Most people don't don't object to that. Maybe people don't want to drink whole milk and eat a steak every day, but some people probably do. And I don't think that anybody has an issue with the idea that we should study and improve nutrition.
Yeah.
But I think that, that is a vehicle. And you mentioned several of these mechanisms, talking about mitochondria, metabolism and stuff like that is sort of a backdoor to sneak in the vaccine stuff. You just don't talk about it like a vaccine. You talk about some kind of metabolic injury that got from, right. What a child immunization, like it happened right after they got vaccinated. That's such a weird thing.
Coincidence.
That's when a lot of kids start showing things like different diseases that has nothing to do with vaccination, but that's what gets blamed. And so you're going to have things like obesity and ADHD and all these other conditions that are diagnosed or that become apparent in fairly early childhood. But after you get past the infant stage, you're going to have a ton of discussion of those types of conditions. Yeah. And that gets right in there with the MAHA chronic disease thing.
Yeah.
For everybody who hasn't been following this like a psychopath like we have, one of the real like tactics that the anti-vax community, the wellness community likes to do is to say that we've all got these chronic diseases that are basically incurable, but they're treatable just with like a secret protocol that you have to buy from only this one person who invented it and who, has all the secret information about it. And that really has been the bread and butter of so many different wellness grifters for years and years and years. And this is essentially having the government help them out, essentially, to say that these types of chronic diseases are real and that this is something to focus on. And I think that's how Kennedy is going to sneak in a lot of the crazy stuff into this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it is true that the anti-vax stuff is not polling well. It's why we saw a few weeks ago that the White House wanted to keep him on a short leash or shorter leash because it is a liability. It's why we somehow pressured PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, to reevaluate the timeline for our measles elimination status to after the midterms. It was supposed to happen in April of this year. Now it's not happening until likely November.
I found out the reason why, though. It's actually not because we pulled some bullshit behind the scenes. I mean, it may be, but it's also mostly because multiple other countries are expected to lose elimination status and they wanted to do them all at the same time.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would not deny the fact that we are probably the reason for that. I mean,
the U.S. did ask for
a large exporter of vaccine misinformation, of vaccine hesitancy. Our outbreaks spill over borders because pathogens don't respect borders. And so what happened in Mexico and what happened in Canada directly related to what was happening here in the U.S. And so it is no shock that more countries than the U.S. and already Canada at this point are going to be poised to lose their elimination status.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, it's just really sad and ironic to me that the U.S. for decades was the world leader in research and in public health, and other nations look to us as the example to follow. And now we are the example not to follow, because literally we are the opposite of everything that we were for the past 50, 60 years.
Well, speaking of precedent breaking, do you want to talk to folks about how we have a new charter as it relates to ACIP?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is some of the stuff. So, Kennedy puts out this podcast thing and it's very splashy and that's the public facing side of MAHA stuff. But where the real anti-vax shit gets done is in the boring things that nobody wants to watch because it's insufferably boring. Like, say, government advisory panels.
Yeah.
And ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at CDC, has had this just crazy trajectory since Kennedy fired all 17 members last June, replaced them with mostly anti-vaxxers and yes men. There's a couple sort of qualified people, and there's one very qualified person on there. Most of the people are pretty unqualified, though, even if they're not extremists. And, one of the issues has been that ACIP has not been able to get anything done. So finally, the American Academy of Pediatrics sued them, and a federal judge issued a stay the day before the last ACIP meeting. or 2 days before the last ACIP meeting, and it was canceled on the basis of the fact that the current ACIP, these anti-vaxxers for the most part, were chosen using a process that doesn't vet their conflicts of interest. It didn't vet their expertise, and they were outside of the terms that the existing ACIP charter, which is renewed every 2 years, specified. So most of them did not have any kind of experience with vaccination or immunization campaigns. So they were not eligible. So instead of firing them and replacing them with the 17 competent people who, were properly vetted, and it takes over a year, by the way, because they really want to make sure that they are not making vaccine recommendations from people who have a financial interest in it. Those 17 people are unlikely to ever be returned to the ACIP under this administration, because they've since written multiple articles, including 2 peer-reviewed articles in the journal that I'm the editor-in-chief of, that have actually quantified the degradation of performance of the current ACIP. So they're not going to be replacing them. And we need an ACIP, because if we don't have an ACIP, nobody's getting a flu shot this fall. Nobody's getting an updated COVID shot. New vaccines that are developed will not be able to be recommended. They won't be available to most people without those recommendations, because they're so important for making sure that vaccination is reimbursed by insurance coverage. So, we need to have an ACIP. Kennedy doesn't want to have a competent ACIP because he doesn't want an ACIP that's actually going to be making evidence-based vaccine decisions. So he did the next thing he could do. He had 2 options: get the old ACIP back or change the rules. And so changing the rules is exactly what they did. New ACIP charter has been made. And the only change that has really been made is to expand the number of disciplines that people could have expertise in. So they added biostatistics, for example, which is clearly meant to include Rasmussen Levy, who is a supply chain expert and has worked on some biostatistical projects. I would not call him a biostatistician, however.
I would just call him a mathematician.
I would call him a supply chain operations guy, because that's what he is. I mean, I have watched an embarrassingly large number of Rasmussen Levy videos to figure out why this guy became just psychotically opposed to mRNA vaccination. Rasmussen Levy, by the way, everybody, is the owner of the worst ponytail in the universe and a completely unqualified member of ACIP who believes that mRNA shots kill people and they should be withdrawn from the market immediately. He's a former Israeli Defense Force intelligence officer who has a zillion kids and basically spends all of his time making stuff up about informed consent. He's nuts. He does a lot of interviews with the Epic Times and these other far-right extremist media outlets. So anyways, they made it biostatistics so that he could be I'm a biostatistician. I have biostatistics experience and I'm a professor at MIT. So put me back on the ACIP so that I can shit-can COVID vaccines. That was the latest plan for the ACIP meeting that got canceled, by the way, was to change the diagnostic codes, which is not something ACIP is actually empowered to do, so that more people would be diagnosed with vaccine injuries. And that was the COVID. That's what the COVID work group for this current ACIP has come up with. So they expanded these categories basically to make sure that all these people can stay on there, with the exception of Robert Malone, who we probably won't have time to get too deep into, but it's okay. There's not that much deep to get into. He got real mad. He was the vice chair of ACIP, COVID Kenny Rogers, and he got real pissed that ACIP wasn't meeting because he really doesn't have anything else going on besides substacking. And so he went off and he quit ACIP to avoid drama because he was, he's the most dramatic person in the world, or at least in the vaccine advisory anti-vax world, one of them. And he's trying to avoid drama, which is hilarious. But then he goes on all these shows. He went on Del Bigtree's High Wire, Del Bigtree's the Alex Jones of the anti-vax world, and tells Del Bigtree that it's because there's a mole on ACIP who is secretly working against Bobby's agenda. And then on top of that, he names in another interview Heidi Overton at the White House as the architect of everything that's being done to thwart the MAHA mission to deschedule as many vaccines as possible. Like, these people are just complete clowns. So I don't think Robert Malone's going to be getting an invitation back. And he says that he's going to work for the State Department, making AI-powered bioweapons detectors. So rest easy, everybody. The terrorists aren't coming for us because Robert Malone's on the case, but everybody else will probably be back. Whenever the next ACIP meeting is, the next one's scheduled for June. So I would imagine it probably would be sometime around then. They'll have another ACIP meeting, and then we're going to see what happens, I guess, at the ACIP.
That's right. That's right. You know, and in the process of them crying wolf right now about trust in public health while making a complete mockery of all public health systems, we are also seeing more slash and burn tactics when it comes to their way of achieving trust or restoring trust, or rather achieving efficiency. And that's, oh, I've got a little visitor. I'm so sorry. That looks like slashing massive budgets for the NIH. And Angie, I'm going to go on mute so you can take it from here so I can handle my little one.
Yeah, no worries. And I just accidentally turned the sound on another one of my things. So apologies for that. Sometimes we have little visitors come running in. Mine are dogs, so they can't speak. So it actually makes it a little bit better unless they're barking, and they also can't be reasoned with, unfortunately. So it's a problem whichever way you look at it, but we're okay with little visitors because this is also just happy hour and we're having a good time and we're having fun. And Jessica, I was going to follow on with what you were saying, but I was just explaining that we love being interrupted by people that we love and, well, in my case, animals that we love. My husband's never needed my assistance in the middle of a live stream, but if he came in, I would help him too.
Well, she woke up much earlier from a nap that I thought would have lasted a lot longer. So
oh God, well, tell her to enjoy those naps while she has unlimited time to take them, because boy, am I jealous of little kids these days.
I really, really, really wish. But yeah, just going back to the massive budget cuts, this, you know, we are just watching a complete atrophy in so many of our systems that are intended to do the exact same thing that they are attempting to do, which is to reduce chronic disease and reduce morbidity and mortality outcomes. They're doing this while cutting massive budgets, kicking people off of WIC and SNAP, defunding the EPA, you know,
kicking millions off their healthcare,
kicking millions off their healthcare, all in the under the facade of efficiency and fat trimming. The thing that makes me the most mad about this, though, is, and we've talked about this before, the consequences are not immediate entirely. Some of them are. Some people today are not able to receive their benefits to buy money this week, to buy food this week. That is absolutely apparent. But some of the long-term residual effects are not going to show up in our public health data for maybe 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. This is going to be the legacy after many of these people are probably not even alive anymore. Certainly after Trump's been gone, will we start seeing some of the effect of what it means to have a skeleton NIH with no money to do the work that they have been charged to do. And so it's very easy to look at us saving money today, but we're not going to save a single life with these dollars unspent.
No, it's crazy. What I think, I've been trying to think of a good analogy for this, because I truly don't think that a lot of people spend any time thinking, nor should they have, because the government used to work. Why would you have to think about it? But think about how these agencies actually work. And one way that they work is the same way that most workplaces work, despite the hype about AI. Most workplaces actually work because they have people that do things in those workplaces. They have employees that carry out functions. The CDC, the NIH, the FDA, CMS, all of our HHS agencies, all agencies throughout the federal government, including within other departments that are not health related, but that are still science, are completely gutted, and they can't do basic things. They can't order supplies, much less carry out groundbreaking research. And so I try to think of how to explain this to people. And, trying to explain an NIH grant, like, for example, the NIH grant process, talk about a boring subject and like not something that's very interesting that most people want to hear about. But I think maybe one of a better analogy would be to say, like, I'm going in for liposuction and I'm going in to just have a little bit trimmed off. And then they like take out all of your internal organs. Like, I mean, that's basically what's happening. It's like you go in, to have a minor surgery and you're dead because they just harvested all of your organs. That is what is essentially happening to the federal government. And that is what is happening to our public health system. And that means that the things that we used to take for granted, that we never even saw happening, that were designed to safeguard our health, aren't happening anymore. And what is that going to look like? Like you said, it's not going to be immediately apparent. But what's terrible about this, I mean, this is like being the lobster that's in the pot, right? Like, what's terrible about this is that by the time, well, I don't know if lobsters ever realize what's going on, but by the time you realize what's going on, it's too late to stop it. And it's going to be probably, I think, pretty horrifying for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be even worse. Like, if you look at just vaccine preventable diseases, like measles, for example, I was looking at the measles numbers this week when I was putting together our newsletter. And, right now, it's the beginning of April. We are almost at the same level that we had all through last year. Those cases were underreported. We had a few more than 2,200, I think, last year in the US. Now we've more than 1,700. That's probably increased since I looked a couple days ago. And that's underreported too. And that's even among reported cases, that's underreported, because one of the CDC's big functions, for example, was to have people collecting data that was reported by state and local health departments. Those people aren't there. The state and local health departments' capacity has been decreased because they've lost funding. And so we are at a point where we want to do this work. The stuff that we thought was not trimmable, was not inefficient, we are not able to do anymore because we have literally trimmed the fat to the point that we don't have a surviving body left. Mm-hmm. And that's what these government cuts are going to do. $5 billion cut to the NIH is a lot less than the 28 or whatever, 20 billion I think they asked for last year that they didn't get. But $5 billion would still cripple the NIH, especially considering there are other mechanisms for taking this money away. Regulating research out of business. We've talked about the lab leak. Juliet and I, Jessica was on vacation last week, so she we had a guest co-host, Juliet Morrison, and she and I talked a lot about the lab leak stuff, the origin stuff. The evidence shows that it was actually zoonotic. The reason that the government keeps saying that it was a lab leak, even though they have no evidence to show that it was, and it probably wasn't, is that they want to use that as an excuse to say that all research is dangerous and so we shouldn't do it anymore. And again, cut the budget. So there's a bunch of different mechanisms for doing this. And there, since Trump took office, it's been a kitchen sink approach in the MAGA HQ. Throw everything at the problem and see what sticks. Usually a couple things will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you haven't seen, if you type in covid.gov, it will take you to a White House page with Trump looking like an Avenger, standing in front of the word lab leak, with a subtitle that says the true origin of COVID-19. This is, again, part of a constant revisionist history that we are seeing, a intentional misremembering of the pandemic, because what is happening right now is an attempt to get the bad guys, the enemies, in trouble, in line, to pay penance for what they have found to be oppressive, totalitarian, censoring, whatever you want to call it. This is part of that grand scheme. And they are mad, and it shows, because if you read the entire page, it is a hysterical, not in the funny way, like a hysteria kind of inclined attempt to sound scientific, but it really reads more like I keep thinking of that scene in Memento with the red lines and the like connecting dots.
Yeah.
it's a pure conspiracy with not a single shred of evidence to back it up.
So it more or less is, because it's essentially the COVID-19 Select Subcommittee report that's been reorganized into essentially political marketing material.
Well, and if you go to all the way to the bottom, it kind of like proves the point that I just made, is they needed a public enemy. And sure enough, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, public enemy number one, Dr. Anthony Fauci, with of course a picture with his head in his hand, a mention to his pardon, and an attempt to say this is the guy, the mastermind behind all of our suffering over the last 6 years. And so it's so deeply unserious, and meant to distract and also meant to justify whatever Maha-MAGA alliance there is. Because again, they're trying to continue to push their agenda while, we're trying to fix what they're breaking down. Which brings me to the next topic that we should talk about, which is Casey Means could still be the next Surgeon General. And now the White House, the very White House that hosts the Lab Leak webpage, is getting in on the fight. The White House is now doing the job that is intended for the head of the Health Committee, which should be Senator Bill Cassidy, Dr. Senator Bill Cassidy. But the White House, in an effort to, I guess, give Bobby a cookie, because they need to keep him in line and need to keep him on a short leash, but can't afford to break up this alliance, they're doing the dirty work for him. They're doing the phone calls. And as Casey's brother, Callie, reported to multiple outlets, including The Hill this week, conversations are ongoing. And those conversations are happening with White House staff and Senate staff, particularly with Murkowski's office and Collins' office, to get them off of the fence, because they believe that they are, quote, persuadable still. That tells you exactly what happened last time could happen again. And what I mean by last time is RFK Jr. just wooed and wooed and wooed Bill Cassidy behind the scenes in the midst of the deliberation after his Senate confirmation hearing, made a bunch of promises that ended up being bold-faced lies, saying, I'm going to work with you. I have no intention of changing the vaccine schedule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which every single promise he's made, he has broken. We have receipts of it. And Bill Cassidy's even called them out. In tweets himself, he has said, this is not what we agreed on, et cetera, et cetera. Even the whole caveat on the webpage about COVID vaccines don't cause autism. There's an asterisk on that page that basically says, well, we couldn't really say it totally because of a deal we made with Senator Bill Cassidy. It actually says that on the webpage.
That asterisk, when I saw it, like, I was just like, I would never be able to show my face again at a professional thing ever. No, I would have to change careers. I would decide to go back to go to law school or something and just be completely different. I might even change my name. But I would be so humiliated by that. It was such an insult to do that on the CDC's webpage. It was, I know I made a promise and I do not give a flying fuck about it. It's really amazing that Kennedy did that and then still has the audacity every 2 seconds to lecture us about trust. It's pretty remarkable when he openly lies constantly, including under oath during his confirmation hearing, including to Bill Cassidy, obviously. He flaunts it that he's such a liar. And then, it's like we saw in his little podcast ad today. Oh, well, I'm restoring radical transparency. It's a new era of trust. It is, like you said, revisionist history. It's completely Orwellian. It's using words as double speak to mean the opposite of what those words actually mean. It is literally redefining people's knowledge and their understanding of the world that we live in and their understanding of reality. Yep. And, this is why science historically has been a very bipartisan issue. I'm not saying that the history of America is blameless or perfect, but at least at some point in the past, our elected leaders did have the wisdom to understand that this is something that should not be decided according to political principles. Mm-hmm. And that is what is one of the many things that is very different, but that I think is fundamentally un-American. about the Trump administration and about the MAGA and MAHA movements is that it is absolutely un-American and undemocratic to make scientific, health, medical, and policy decisions based on vibes when people could potentially die from this, not in a war, not in combat, but just die from having bad health and not having something that the government used to provide for them to keep them safe and alive and a productive member of our society. And for me, you know, being American means being part of a country and a nation that has values that we support each other as a nation to be the best. That is what we do in America. We're exceptionalists. We think we're the fucking best. USA, number one. I can't get it out of my head. I'm from the 80s. You know, I am about Coca-Cola and blue jeans and like rock and roll and like, I don't know, having fun American style, which means doing what I want within the bounds of the law. You know, Kennedy is doing whatever he wants while making the laws, while making the rules, while making the policies. You know, as all of us Americans realize that democracy and the freedom that comes with it is a huge responsibility. That's why historically American values have not been like, we love free speech. Let's run around and tell people a bunch of lies. We used to criticize the Soviet Union for doing that because it wasn't transparent. It wasn't honest. It wasn't true. And it wasn't consistent with reality. And it wasn't consistent with a nation that is governed by its own people who are capable of having agency and making their own decisions.
Yeah.
What Kennedy is trying to impose in terms of his health policies and his beliefs is essentially an authoritarian Soviet style dictatorship that does not allow us to have any freedom. And that's what happens when you start making decisions about who should be a qualified surgeon general. So a physician who actually has a technical qualification for the job. You make that decision based on who has the best qualifications, not who is the best, you know, suited to whoever's in power politically.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on with Casey Means. So it's very important that for Americans who are watching this and are very frustrated, as I'm sure we all feel, it feels like you can't do anything. This is actually one of the situations where you can do something and it's not a heavy lift. Whatever state you live in, call your senator, call the Senate switchboard. Yeah. I'll put up links and phone numbers so that you can get that information in the post about this. But call them and tell them that Casey Means should not be confirmed as Surgeon General.
Yes.
Still.
Yes, still. And the fact that this is even still a conversation is wild. You know, this should have been dead and done weeks ago.
Well, you know, Jess, I mean, we covered her entire 3-hour agonizing hearing. And that's something that we're going to continue to do as those types of events come up. I'm really glad that we did because we were able to really see in a very granular way exactly how unqualified she was.
Exactly.
That was at the end of February. So it's been more than, it's been like 8 weeks pretty much. And oh boy, it's shocking to me that she wasn't an automatic no that day.
Yeah.
But in this administration, it shouldn't be that shocking.
No.
I mean, we're going to have a fresh hell next week. I'm going to quickly, I know we're kind of running short on time, and hey, everybody, like who's watching, I'm going to figure out better ways for us to interact because I'm not getting comments or like things on Substack Live coming through. So I'm going to figure out ways to make this more interactive. Like, please bear with us. As Jess and I had a meeting earlier today, and it's kind of apparent that between the two of us, we know like some things. So we've got a little bit of homework to do ourselves in terms of competent production. But we do want to really have this show be something that is useful to you, because Jess and I can talk anytime, and we do quite a lot. But when we're talking sort of publicly here for these things, we want to make sure that we're talking about things that are relevant to you, because that's why we're doing it. We think that it's so important to empower everybody about what's happening in the world as far as health and science go, because it's literally a matter of life or death. So please let us know. Give us feedback, either comments on Instagram, comments on my Twitter, comments on either of our Substacks.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think about this format, about the length, about any of this stuff, about the topic type material, the scheduling even. We can, we aim to please. But I just wanted to finish off with one thing. If you guys are not doing that much this weekend, and if you don't happen to know anything about stupid drama with far-right extremists in Canada, then you should really check out the CBC Fifth Estate's new documentary on the H5N1 ostrich convoy that more or less ruined my life starting last summer or so. I'm in it. I look pretty good, and I have a really hot outfit, so that's the most important part. I do have straight hair. I'm not doing 90s in that interview, but it's a really good interview. It's really informative, and if you haven't been following the absolutely wild shit that goes on in Canada, where I live, with what is kind of called the Maple MAGA crowd. So they're MAGA people and Maha people, medical freedom people. The trucker convoy from 2022 is the Canadian equivalent of January 6th. Basically, there's the same stuff happening here. It's just maple flavored. It's Canadian. So anyways, these ostriches got H5N1. The owners refused to kill them. They started a far-right PR media circus. I got dragged in. I got lots of death threats. The CFIA inspectors, that's the USDA of Canada, got even more death threats. They finally killed the ostriches, and the ostrich farmers were antibody grifters. There's so much to this story that is just so crazy, and most people in the US don't know anything about it. So if you just want like a nice 43-minute, easy to watch show about problems in another country and you're American, watch the CBC Fifth Estate. I'll put a link to that. If you're Canadian, you may have already watched it. It's going to be on the air tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, but I will also include that link for you. So enjoy the ostrich fascists this week.
Yes.
And I'm certainly enjoying them being in my rearview mirror.
If you can indulge me to just share 2 epi updates for your weekend, just because they are timely and important, and I do think can help make you all make informed choices for your lives for moving forward. RSV is not behind us. RSV is still spreading quite quickly. And just yesterday, I shared my personal story of my son's hospitalization with RSV in 2019. As according to the Association of Immunization Managers, this week, 66 jurisdictions have actually extended their vaccination window for eligibility through the end of this month. Typically, respiratory virus season would not be extended this far for that type of vaccine, but that just tells you how severe it is. So if you have not been immunized, if you are still eligible, if you have a kid who is age eligible, or if you're pregnant and your provider encourages that, please just talk to your providers and see if that might be a way to reduce your risk of a really preventable hospitalization and acute infection. And then the second thing is also measles is not behind us. We are almost at 2,000 cases, Angie, and this is a absolute nightmare because it does not have to be this way. We used to have 0, and now we are in the thousands. And I just cannot believe this is our reality. And what the saddest thing is about this is it's probably an undercount. There are probably many more cases that have not been detected. And so please, if your children have not been vaccinated for MMR, if you are in a high-risk place, if you are potentially traveling to a place that's a high-risk place, make sure that you are up to date on your MMR vaccine, because we are in the midst of a large-scale outbreak, unfortunately, in this country.
I think that's fantastic, Jess. I think that's such a good reminder. It's such an urgent problem. And I really do want to just add to that there's 2 things about vaccine safety to add to that. So a lot of people have heard that the RSV vaccine is unsafe. That has to do with misinformation about a much older RSV vaccine that was tested and found to be unsafe that is no longer used. So the RSV vaccine that Jess is talking about, there's actually 2 different products. There's a vaccine and there's also antibodies. But and your doctor can help you decide which is right for you, depending on your age and your status. But in any case, it's correct that RSV is really bad this year. It's very severe. this vaccine, both vaccination products that are being offered and encouraged this year are not the same as that RSV vaccine that people talk about being unsafe, not the same in any way whatsoever. So don't hesitate if vaccine safety issues are holding you back. There are not significant ones, and you can discuss the ones that there are, again, with your doctor. With measles, that vaccine has been used since 1961. And so I just really want to emphasize this for people, that the reason why why young infants under a year old cannot get the measles vaccine is because it's a live attenuated vaccine.
Yeah.
And so babies who have not had a chance yet to develop their own immune systems and rely on their mother's immunity may not be able to fully protect themselves against even an attenuated vaccine like the measles vaccine. So that's why it's not safe for infants to get it. But after the age of about 12 months, and actually before that, they use 12 months though, because it's safe for everybody. It is safe. It's very, very safe, and it has been used for nearly 70 years. So I really want to emphasize that this is not a vaccine that has no track record or that we haven't studied it properly. Literally billions of people around the world have gotten this vaccine. And up until we stopped using it by choice, we had eliminated measles for more than 20 years. So I really, really want to encourage people to get any questions. It's okay to have questions about vaccine safety, vaccine injuries. Get answers from people like us, your doctor, people who know what they're talking about, who can give you honest, correct answers about this, and who might be able to, help allay any fears you might have. Also may able to point you toward resources if we can't answer your questions. So please do consider that and keep looking for that good information. And we're going to be here to provide it for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for that reminder. And thanks everybody for sticking around, even though we're always late. We're getting better. We're going to have one of these days, I'm going to have a 0 days since another starting the live stream late incident. But thanks again for coming, everybody. We'll have another MMMWR newsletter out next Tuesday and another episode of Taking Shots next Friday. So see you then.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Get vaccinated. Sorry, I'm incompetent at turning this off.